I'm gonna make a pasta salad. The pasta has already been cooked because it's just easier to start that way. But you can use any pasta you like for pasta salad. But I think typically people expect like the short noodles of any kind, macaroni noodles or the rotini, which is what I'm using. I like the tricolor because it supposedly has veggies in it, which is cool. Just follow your instructions for the pasta any way that it says to make it. And now I've drained it and it's cooling. The pasta does need to be pretty much cooled, like room temperature, before you mix the vegetables in. So I've got that started so that I can just do my vegetables. Those are going to go in the fridge and rest as well. I'll go over all of that. So I've got little tomatoes, knocking over my salt. Um, I used this broccoli slaw last time. It just already came like that, and I really liked it, so it's going in. It's a mixture of broccoli, cabbage, and carrots, but I'm going to pick the big chunks of cabbage out because, uh, yeah, just a preference. First thing I'm going to do, I'm also going to have onion. I'm going to use part of the onion, not the whole onion. Some baby spinach that I'm going to chiffonade. I'm going to slice it up. And pepitas. These are roasted and salted pumpkin seeds. I tried to find roasted that weren't already salted, but I couldn't. So if you're using stuff that's already salted, just keep that in mind when you're salting everything else, because it's all going to come together and you don't want a big giant pot of salts. I mean, maybe you do, but you probably shouldn't. I'm going to do the tomatoes first. And I know I probably could just cut this stuff up and then film, but I like to talk while I'm cooking. All right. I like to slice them up and then just cut them. Just like a sloppy cut. I like my vegetables to have a little chunk to them, not too much. I'm going to actually do it this way because it makes more sense. So anyway, slice in half. I'm quartering them. These little tomatoes tend to be full of seeds. I don't get rid of them, at least not like intentionally. I will put them in with everything else. I don't see why not. But some people have like an ick about the tomato seeds, so feel free to squish the seeds out. You can also like rinse the tomato pieces in like a colander strainer after you cut them if you really want to get all of the seeds off, if it's that much of a thing. No worries. The great thing about pasta salad, typically, there is no real rule as far as what you have to put in there. Pasta is pretty much the only prerequisite. But for it to be a pasta salad, it has to have at least, a couple of ingredients besides that. So I'm just cutting up however many of these little tomatoes that I like. I think it's going to end up being, let's see, I haven't even been counting. I like to get the tomatoes that have like the multiple colored baby tomatoes, especially like they go on sale sometimes. I like the color that they bring, like this one's orange, here's some dark red, some like regular red. I know I apologize that my camera is so far from my work, and that this is the angle I use. It's because I don't have a camera stand for my phone. I've thought about getting one, but I really don't do this often enough to like record, to make the camera stand a worthwhile investment at the moment. This meal can potentially also be pretty cheap. I know all these vegetables, it sounds expensive, but one batch of pasta salad, the whole box of pasta, I can use like a handful of the tomatoes that come in the pack, like a third of the bag of spinach. The broccoli slaw I have, that's from the last time I made it a few days ago. A lot of these vegetables, at least when it's just two people, they really stretch a long way, and keeping them in a very cold part of the refrigerator will help keep them fresh longer. So today, when I went to buy supplies for this, all I had to do was buy spinach and tomatoes. Well, actually, I also bought a little bit more Italian dressing because that's going to go in there too, and I'm almost out of it. All right. I used what I had left of the tomatoes because waste not, want not. Big old pile of tomatoes. They're so pretty. I'm going to put these in my bowl. You always have a bowl ready for your ingredients if you're chopping. You can't just leave piles everywhere. Eventually, you'll run out of cutting board. I use my knife. Now, some of this stuff, like I said I'm not going to intentionally throw the seeds away. I'm also not going to like go out of my way to gather them. If they make it into the bowl, they do. Typically, I cut my tomatoes last, but for some reason, I didn't. So, if your board gets too messy from those juicy tomatoes, just use a paper towel. Sop it up. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and throw in my slaw mix. And like I said, I do like to pick out the big chunks of purple cabbage. I don't care for them, and neither does my boyfriend. Yeah, maybe if they're a little smaller, I don't know. But thankfully, we both agree on this. So, and it's not even that I don't like cabbage. It's just in this situation, that's not what I want. Probably going to put the rest of this in here. And as I put it in the bowl, I can just pick it out. Again, I should probably cut this part out, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to keep talking while I do this. So, I love making pasta salad. I've made it a bunch of different ways. I mean, typically, they're all very similar, like composition. Pasta, vegetables, meat or some kind of protein, and some kind of dressing to keep it all moist. I know a lot of pasta salads, like people think of like macaroni salad and it's very mayonnaise heavy. That's fine. You could even do a mayonnaise base here, but we don't prefer the creamy pasta salad. And also, I try to be a little more health conscious. I love mayonnaise, but yeah, anyways, kind of rambling on that point. So I put the rest of the broccoli slaw in here. This is basically now just broccoli and carrots. Here we go. I know I shouldn't waste it, but no one's going to eat it, so I'm not saving the purple cabbage. All right. Next, I'm going to do some spinach. I've showed this before. Sorry for the squeaking. My garbage door keeps creaking on me. All right. Now, to do a nice, easy sort of slicing, we're going to do a technique called a chiffonade. And I'm pretty sure that I learned about this either from Emeril Lagasse, from the Emeril Live show back in the day, or Alton Brown. Like, those were my two cooking inspirations as a child before I even really knew how to cook. I wished I could cook like them. So what you do, I've got this pile of spinach, right? You probably just pull it out. It looks like that. Press down with your hands, pinch it like this, and as you're still pinching, just start rolling it up. It's going to be a very loose, rolled up wad of spinach. Okay? It's not going to be perfect. You just want to keep it somewhat together because it's going to make slicing it really nice and easy. Okay, knife. Now you're holding the roll shut, curl your fingers in so you don't cut them off, and just slide your fingers down. And because they're all rolled up together, what happens is they make almost like nice little ribbons of spinach. So instead of leaves like that, I've got like little ribbons of spinach, like spinach confetti. I like to do that because even though this is baby spinach, I don't necessarily want like giant pieces of spinach in here. I want it to all mix together nicely. So in the bowl, I'm going to do more spinach actually because I like it. Again, that's the beauty of pasta salad. You kind of do what you like with it. And the goal for me in this is to have enough of this to eat for a few meals, as well as send some of it to work with my boyfriend as leftovers. That was even better roll than the previous one. So when you slice it, you kind of see it all come apart. Yeah. This is, I believe, called a chiffonade style cutting. These turned out even nicer, little strips of spinach. If you don't want to do it that way, you don't have to. I like to because it makes it even. Also helps the water express more while it's in its resting phase. At least that's what I feel. And when you stir it all in, it'll just really go nicely. All right, and that's a lot of spinach, and I know it's all fluffed up. It'll kind of condense on its own in a bit. We're going to take this beautiful, I'm so proud of this onion. First onion I grabbed, and I've actually had this on the counter for a couple days because I didn't need it yet. But I've been really excited to use it. It's so gorgeous. This is a sweet onion. I'm just cutting off the top, cutting off the bottom, and then I take and I kind of cut like a very shallow cut around the skin, just a slice that I can dig in and peel that first layer without necessarily cutting the whole onion in half right away. And if I'm lucky, look at that peel. If I'm lucky, it'll peel off altogether. Look at that. Ah, perfect onion, perfect peel. Now I've got this intact. Ugh, almost ashamed to cut that onion. Next, I have a bag nearby because when I have onion hands, I'm going to have a lot of waste here, and I don't want to touch everything in my kitchen. So I have a trash bag. Some people say a food waste bowl. I use a bag because usually I'm cooking after I've come home from the store. I have this whole onion. I'm not going to use the whole onion. I'm going to cut it in half, and then I'm going to cut it in half again. So I'm going to use 1/4 of an onion. Or so. That's a little under half. But anyways, actually this looks like about 1/3 of an onion, and I'm going to go with that because we like onions too. So I'm going to cut it in a certain way. I'm going to cut it across like this, and then I'm going to go across like this, and then from there I'll probably dice it up some more. So when you're doing the slices, if you keep your fingers on the outside, you can keep the onion together, keep all the pieces from falling over. And the reason that I like to do that, this is very uneven cutting, oh my gosh, is that when I'm going to turn it and cut it like the other way, and when it's all together like this, it's a lot easier. Yeah, this is probably the most uneven cutting I've ever done. Okay, so now we see onion, and it's roughly together. I shouldn't keep doing that though. Now I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to cut it this way. Keep your fingers in. So I'm definitely going to be like dicing these up even more because this is not going to be small enough for my preference of cut, but you can always keep them a little chunkier if you like. I know I said I like a chunky vegetable in my salad, but onions are kind of the exception. I like to feel and taste the onion, but I don't want like a giant chunk of onion. This one just flew across the room. Alright, so I'm just gonna go in, move this guy. Okay, so now I have this giant pile of pretty evenly cut onion for the most part. And that's because of the way I cut it. I was able to make sure that all the pieces are pretty uniform. Now that doesn't actually matter because I'm going to cut them up even smaller. And so I know you're not going to be able to really see this, but I'm going to put it in a row, and then you just take the onion, cut it up. I'm resting. I use like almost like a fulcrum. I don't think that's the right word. But I like to put pressure on this side while I'm doing this side, and that sort of helps me keep control, because if I just push the knife down like this, it's probably not going to like make clean all the way cuts through. So just going to go down the line. Onions are flying. My cutting board is not as big as I wish it was. and maybe a third of an onion was a little too ambitious. I am not a professional, clearly, so don't judge my knife work here. I wish I had like a bigger knife, like one of those. I don't know. Just keep cutting until you're satisfied. I think these are a little better off. If I'd have cut it better the first time when I was doing the initial rows, I could have probably made it smaller to begin with. But, all right. So now, these are still relatively even. They're a little chunky, but they're not like overly chunky. This entire onion going in the bowl. Pieces. Now, I always wipe my counters down before and after I cook, and that's because, you know, like this case, for instance, my onions are just kind of going everywhere around my cutting board. The ones that hit the floor, there's a couple, they're gonna go in the trash, but I can just, with a clean counter, I can feel confident in picking up that piece of onion off the counter and just using it. I mean, yeah, I guess you could wash it off if you were unsure, but if a cut onion is hitting the floor, I'm just giving up on it. It's just a little piece, it's fine. You make your own decisions there. Okay. Now I have this bowl of all my vegetables. What we're going to do next is lightly salt them. I say lightly because I don't like a lot of salt, and my pepitas, my little pumpkin seeds, they are already salted, and the dressing I'm going to make has salt in it already. So just enough salt because we're going to wilt, or I don't think that's the right word. Well, anyways, what's going to happen is you mix a little bit of salt in, you let it rest. It's going to rest in the fridge because food safety. But after a little while, the excess moisture starts to become expressed, and that's good because if you mix in these fresh vegetables into the pasta salad without pre-salting them, what's going to happen is the salt that is in the dressings and everything else, or any salt that I might add, is going to start causing the liquid to express, but it's going to do it in your already prepared pasta salad, which could lead to a watery pasta salad. When you do it this way, you can let it rest, stir it up a few times over time, and the extra water is going to end up at the bottom. You can also squeeze out a little bit, and then you just put those vegetables in there. They're already going to get this way in your pasta salad, but if you salt them ahead of time, then it will not affect the quality of your pasta salad. You won't have watery pasta salad unless you like it that way. I usually use a salt grinder, but I can't grind the salt and hold the camera at the same time, so I just put a little bit in my hand. This doesn't look like a little bit, but it's all bunched up in my hand. This is about 5 or 6 turns of the salt shaker, and I'm just going to sprinkle that in there and then move it about. Now, again, I wash my hands between most phases of, unless I'm touching a vegetable and then touching a vegetable, that's fine. But if I'm going to be opening like a cabinet to dig through for some spices and then come back to my food, you gotta wash your hands. Washing your hands pretty much all the time. Especially because I'm not the only one eating this. I know people will be like, well, it doesn't matter if I'm the only one eating it. And I guess technically that's true. But the thing is you should always practice good hand washing etiquette when cooking, because it gets you in the habit of doing that, first of all, because you don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to make a potluck for work next week, and then you just do what you do, and then you don't wash your hands after you pet the dog, or you let your cat walk on the couch, whatever, there's reasons people don't eat at potlucks. But anyways, yeah, good hand washing practices are important, not just, because people think it's gross if you don't, which is true. It is disgusting if you don't wash your hands, but also, you don't want to make yourself sick. You might think, oh, it's just me, I'm not going to do that. But you never know if something you've touched is going to interfere. So just be safe Wash your hands. Okay. I've thoroughly massaged these vegetables, probably more than I needed to. I'm going to probably go in there again after I move my hands out, but I'm going to wrap this up and put it in the fridge, and then I'll return once the pasta is cooled down and I begin the final stages. Right, I've got my veggies wrapped up. I'm just going to wrap the top with this, and I'm going to put it in the fridge, and it can rest while the pasta cools down. You can probably hear the microwave, but I'm also microwaving some turkey bacon. You can put whatever protein you like in there. I think my mom mentioned that she wanted to try it with pepperoni. So yeah, be creative. I'll be back. Alright, I have my pasta cooled down. I'm going to have to do this one-handed or put the phone down at times. So again, I don't really have a phone holder for this situation. But I'm going to take my noodles and I'm going to mix in my lovely batch of mixed veggies that I cut up. Alright, I'm going to put the phone down. I know it's hard to see, but there is a bit of liquid at the bottom of this bowl. That's the excess moisture that came out with the salting and whatnot. I didn't choose to squeeze it out because it didn't seem like that watery. The spinach is the most watery part, I think. But yeah, so bowl's going in the sink. And then we're just going to stir all of this lovely vegetables. I'm using the Mueller's brand pasta this time, like I showed you, but funny, I actually prefer my grocery store's like store brand pasta for this type of pasta, I guess. For whatever reason, their noodles are a little like puffier, like I don't really know, like maybe just not as tightly wound, but whatever the case, I mean they taste the same, but there's like a different sort of appearance. Okay, so we've turned this around in here, all that, but it's not done yet. I microwaved the turkey bacon. Yes, I left it in for too long because I walked off with it in the microwave thinking it would be, but some of it got burnt. So I'm going to have to carefully pick out the worst looking pieces and go from there. Alright, I got the stuff in there. Yeah, there's still some dark bits, but it's not too bad. Actually, that one doesn't look nice. But yeah, I kept out the worst looking parts. Again, that's totally my fault. I walked away instead of leaving it. Usually I put it in for 5 minutes and then just, you know, another minute after that, and I keep watching it, but I got impatient, and of course it was done then. I'm not going to fully stir this yet just because I'm going to keep moving. The next thing I'm going to stir in there is these pepitas. Now, oh, I forgot to mention, the turkey bacon I used is the low sodium version, so it's the least amount of salt I could have in it. These guys are going to be where like the majority of the salt comes from, and that's fine. I mean, I try to watch the amount of sodium intake, but there's only so much you can do with unless you just want to go without salt completely, which sucks. I'm using the Ken's Simply Vinaigrette. I prefer that. It does not have as much sodium as the other Italian dressings, and it's just tasty. I know it doesn't sound like not much sodium there, but it's the best I could find. Could make it myself, but I don't want to. So this is what I do. I'm going to put that in there, and I'm also going to include this roasted garlic aioli. This is probably the most expensive part of this entire meal because this little jar costs $8 now. It used to cost $6, but I just buy it for specific things, pretty much just the pasta salad, and it's not going to be a creamy pasta salad, but the garlic aioli adds, of course, the garlic flavor and just like a hint of creaminess, you know? I'm just going to put probably about 2 tablespoons of this, maybe more if I see I need it. And the rest of this to start with, but we'll see how much. You're just going to have to eyeball it. If you don't want it too wet, just stir a little bit in at a time. If you like a wet pasta salad, go off, you know. Be right back. Alright, got that in there. It's a little more than 2 tablespoons, but I will have to put this down to stir it fully, but I will be right back. And here we are. This is my favorite pasta salad. All in all, it is 1 box of rotini, about 1/3 of an onion, about half a bag of spinach, looked like about a quarter to a third a bag of the broccoli slaw, and about, I'd say it was like 10 or 12 baby tomatoes. This is actually a little more garlic aioli than I intended, but that's fine. Oh, and, you know, the handful of pepitas that I put in here. For the turkey bacon, that was about 6 pieces, I think it was. I cut them up before I microwaved them, but you can do it either way. This has fiber. This has the vitamins. This has pasta. Has protein. If you wanted to use tofu, you could. If you want to use pepperoni, you can. Shrimp, you can. Or no protein. I mean, go off. Do what you like. I would add beans to this, I think, if I could, but my boyfriend's not a bean eater. So, this is perfect, though. And it's going to be his lunch for the next couple days, my lunch for the next couple days, probably dinner tonight. Yeah. There we have it.